Hi, Space Cab listeners. So today we're going into the woods. We're going on a hunt in search of mushrooms. What do mushrooms do? Many things, more than you would think. They're almost cultish. They can make you high, they can make you better, they can make you very sick. We're going to need a guide, and we have one. Our new friend, Kathy Vatcher.
I got interested in mushrooms a long time ago. I guess when I was first married, my first husband, he was part native, and his father used to go collect morels. So he was the first one that I ever knew who picked mushrooms out of the wild and ate them. So I was interested in those, but I didn't really pursue it until I was on the West Coast. And then when I was in, I guess, Vancouver area, the island, and I went up to Haida Gwaii to look for psilocybin mushrooms. And then after
Wow.
that, I got interested in all kinds of edibles and all kinds of other mushrooms. So then I didn't do any
Gee,
with it really till probably about 11 years ago. And I joined the Mycological Society, and I started going out to all the forays and getting more serious and studying them and learning from other people. I have a lot of, great friends who know, 10 times what I know. And they've been kind enough to mentor me. And when I start teaching anybody about mushrooms, I usually show them the poisonous ones first. And then I tell them not to eat any white ones until you know, you have some kind of deep knowledge, because some of the more poisonous ones are the beautiful white amanitas. So I show people what's edible and stuff like that. That's not my main concern. When I'm teaching people about mushrooms, I like to inform them on everything about mushrooms. I did a presentation for a few groups. It's called The Tip of the Iceberg: Discoveries in the Present World of Mycology and Its Important Role in Our Past, Present, and Future. So that's a pretty comprehensive hour and a half presentation with a PowerPoint. And it talks about, the history. Like, mushrooms were thought to be plants until, what was the year? 1967. They were given their own
they're
kingdom.
actually a way into a different realm.
Yeah, well, it
They're
is. It's called the Fifth
completely,
Kingdom, you know?
yes.
And
I'm writing that down now.
yeah, and there's Bryce Kendrick. He's dead now, but he was a famous Canadian mycologist, and he wrote a great book called The Fifth Kingdom. And basically, we need them for so many things. I mean, we'd be, the trees wouldn't rot. I mean, we'd be buried under
That's right.
tons of stuff if it wasn't for fungi. So it has all kinds of positive applications, also negative things, like, athlete's foot.
All right. Okay.
You can inhale a certain spore from a mushroom called a Schizophilum commune. You don't have to ingest them to have them be dangerous, but they're great helpers. I mean, really, not just that they decompose everything, but they're finding there's medicinal properties, and the use of psilocybin now in PSTD, and they're treating addictions with
Depression.
it, depression, end of life therapy. So the major work on that is being done since 2000 at Johns Hopkins Hospital. But all kinds of other places, including U of T, they're exploring all this, the potential for psilocybin to help people. And also LSD, which comes from ergot, right? It's a called
Which the
perpetua.
monks ate, and I thought that came from bread mold.
Yeah, it comes from rye. rye in Ontario, growing on rye, but it can be, like Albert Hoffman, he extracted LSD from that, and he had the first accidental LSD trip when he was in his lab, 20 years after he was fooling around with this. It was during World War II, 1943. And he thought, I'll look at this again, because they were thinking this could help women in childbirth with bleeding and all kinds of other things. So he accidentally ingested some and, felt himself very, very stone high. And then the next day he thought, he was afraid. He thought he was losing his mind at first, but then he thought, I'm going to try a higher dose. And the next day he did. And he
I love that so.
bicycle ride home, right? There's a video on YouTube about that. But he was a great advocate for LSD throughout his life. And he hated people like Timothy Leary, who he said destroyed.
Timothy Leary seemed mean. He seemed mean-spirited.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. He was kind of a
He wasn't very nice to the dolphins.
Yeah, well, he was a weird guru type, but he turned on to it and he thought everybody in the world should be doing acid. And, that's not necessarily true. I mean, anybody with any kind of underlying deep psychological problems could find themselves in real trouble. But, Nixon called him, what did he say? The most dangerous man in America, so the whole war on drugs, I mean, too bad Leary kind of wrecked it.
Yeah.
Everything, because they were doing research into this stuff in the 50s and 60s in Canada for helping with addiction.
Terrible things.
Yeah, they were investigating
the Ottawa.
Yeah, and then it became, then it was illegal.
And to women because they were in menopause.
Mushrooms were legal, then they were illegal, then they were legal, so they kept changing, the psilocybin rulings. Now I guess you can just go in Toronto to some place and go buy them in a store, or online.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, what do you want to ask me? Do you want to ask
I want to know. I don't know. What do you want to talk about?
I have a question.
Have you seen any?
Yeah, Colin, what did you say?
No, I just want to, you mentioned, it's not even a question, it's just a comment, but you mentioned ergot, which comes from rye. And that's one of the postulations of what happened with the Salem witch trials.
Yes, that's right.
They were.
No, you're right.
They had just like old rye flour.
You thought they were having hallucinations,
and they were just all stoned.
Well,
is it?
Well, there wasn't any evidence to that, but it was a hypothesis that was put forward. But we know that there were places in Europe where whole cities, whole towns, they were all tripping.
There is one burning question, Kathy, but I'm trying to plan a moment to ask it.
Well, ask right now.
Okay. Can you tell us, have you ever seen a UFO, and would you tell us about it?
Have I ever seen a UFO? Well, I think I might have. Years ago in BC, I was on Lake, what was it? Lake Kamloops or something, one of those big lakes. And at night we saw, flashing lights, would look like, could have been some kind of aircraft, and, going all over crazy in the sky and then disappearing. And we weren't the only ones, and we weren't on anything. So we were completely sober when we saw this. And I remember thinking, if they asked me if I wanted to go up with them, if they landed, I would probably say yes.
Yes.
I think that would be a fun adventure. But that's the only time I thought I ever saw anything like that. And I was with a bunch of people. We all saw the same things. So, it very well could have been, who knows?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not as if anybody really knows what any of it is at all. DMT? Can we talk about Terence McKenna?
I know about Terence McKenna, but I DMT, that's
he would talk about the machine
from a mushroom. That's not a mushroom.
No, I know.
No. I think Yeah,
What do
I
you
was
think, your
with
parents?
people and they tried it, and I tried it, but it I don't know, maybe something didn't work out for me, but I didn't have all the effects that everyone else had, where they were seeing, crystal palaces and all this stuff. But
And the
recently,
machine health.
yeah, recently though, I did something I wanted to do for a few years, and it was a therapeutic dose of psilocybin. And I did it with a friend who's he's a scientist and he's a dear friend. He's a, really good amateur mycologist. He hangs out with people like Paul Stamets and uh, uh, Merlin Sheldrake. And, he's a member, he works for the fungi organization. Anyway, so he was with me when I did it. And I did it with the whole blindfold and the guided music that Johns Hopkins has made to accompany your trip. So it was a measured dose. It lasted
Oh,
4 hours
oh,
and it was intense. It was very profound. It
music,
was much
music.
more, yeah, the music really helped. It was very profound. It was a 4 hour trip. And it wasn't like doing 2 grams and out partying with your friends in
Yeah.
nature. It was completely different. So I'd say I'd do that again probably every 6 months to help with depression, motivation, anxiety, all those things. Well, it was more than that. It was like going really, really inside because I had the blinders
Yeah.
on. I just connected with the music.
So you keep blinders on?
Yeah, the whole time.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen all the movies regarding mushrooms. Yeah. I love seeing the
Scared.
what do you call it when it goes slow, the time lapse photography. I love that.
Yes.
But I enjoy edible mushrooms. I enjoy
Yeah.
medicinal mushrooms. I get chaga and I get turkey tail and I give it to people. I don't sell those. Some of the really high-end mushrooms I save and send off to friends as gifts. I used to sell a little bit to restaurants to pay for my gas to go there and back because now it's $30 for me to go up north and back, so just for a day.
Yeah.
So I collect a lot of edibles and I dry them and I give them as gifts to friends. And then I take medicinal mushrooms that I find too for the brain, like
Wow.
some of the a coral, not the coral fungi, some of the hericiums like line mane and stuff like this. They're supposed to be really good for your brain activities. So
Have
I
you
don't
noticed?
know. But when people are on the psilocybin, they've done MRIs and stuff of the brain. So people on psilocybin and not. And it's quite interesting to see how lit up the brain is. I mean, how many new neural pathways are being made, that you can break out of old habits, and that's what I'm mostly interested in, breaking out of patterns or habits that are stopping me from being as creative as I can be, having my full potential. So I use them that way, and I don't know, I don't know if they work or not. They're still looking at all this stuff, but mushrooms, you can do, like right now, they have things like you don't have to be buried. You can get a burial suit. This
Yes.
woman in New York is making.
Oh,
It's embedded with mycelium. So instead of
oh,
having a coffin and having all that bad stuff like embalming fluid and stuff seep into
they
the earth,
just put,
yeah, you're
wow.
buried in the shroud. It costs
Oh, I think
1,500
you
US.
told it.
The mushrooms eat you, and then you can have a
Yeah.
tree planted on you, and the mushrooms in your body can nourish the growth. It just eats your body. It just helps the worms along and, the nematodes and stuff and everything that's going to eat you. The world's largest
Yeah.
organism is
Yes.
a mushroom. Did you know
Yes.
that? That
That
particular mushroom, it's a good edible. But you know
Really?
what they use it for?
What is the name
They
of
use it in the Arctic. They use it in the Arctic, the rhizomorphs, or it's like a shoelace rhizome that the mushrooms grow out of. They use it to mark paths in the dark, when they're with their
it? Wow.
rainbow and they want to know how to go home.
Why?
It's called foxfire. You might have heard it, foxfire. And it is a what is the word for it? There's a lot of mushrooms that are like this. They glow in the dark, right? Well,
Say,
mushrooms talk to each other and they talk to the trees and they talk
yeah.
to me because they call me and they tell me to come and
Really?
get them. And when I'm in the
Can you?
woods, yeah, they call me. And then they call me again when I'm in the woods and they just say, Kathy, we're over here. But I know what trees to look for to see the certain mushrooms. But people always ask me how I can find so many. Well, I just open
Yeah.
myself and they call me and I go get them. So it sounds crazy, but it's true. And other people I know who have the same kind of experience, they all feel the same way, you know. Colin,
Kathy,
what?
yes. I would like to ask a question. I mean, you're talking about mushroom networks and how they're vast and one of the most complex beings on Earth. Have you read The Overstory? Are you familiar with that?
No, but I've heard of it.
Okay, well, it's by, I actually had to just check because I couldn't remember the author, but it won a Pulitzer Prize, and shortlisted for a Man Booker Prize. But in any case, it's about uh, ecological activists and how the forest works as a
Oh,
unit and how it's all connected by mushrooms. And and
Yes.
and it's based on, oh God, and she's BC based, I
Sue
believe.
Samard.
Well,
Sue Samard.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right,
I know her. Yeah.
right. So you
Yeah.
you know
Samard.
her,
Not
yeah.
personally. I know her book.
No,
Um,
but
and
yeah.
I'm aware. Yeah. No, I know her book and it's so true. I mean, there's so many people that, are tuned into this. She's the first one that coined the phrase the wood wide web
Okay, yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
the
what is why?
mycelium. So yeah, in my talk, actually, I talk about Sue Samard, and there's also another guy. He was a forester from where is he from? From Germany. And he wrote a book too about mostly about trees and how they talk to each other and this kind of thing, so they can warn each other when something bad's going to happen.
Yes.
And they do. They tell
Yes.
each other there's a
Yes,
drought
they
coming,
do.
or I'm being chopped down, you
Oh.
might be next, like all kinds of stuff. Like, yeah,
Oh, wow.
they know, and they can support a tree that might need help and they can get nutrients to it. They don't, they can compete, but they usually, the mycelium underneath, that's what's helping. So think of a mushroom as a fruiting body. It's like an apple on a tree. So you can
Right.
pick it and they'll come back because the spores are spread there. The mycelium's underneath. There's so much, like in a teaspoon, there's like there's miles of mycelium. You don't really get high on the spores. You get high on the mushroom or the mycelium. When they're releasing spores is when they're moist. You can't do a spore print
It
on a
is a giant
I'll tell
bag.
you, you can't do a spore print on a dried mushroom. You have to wet it. If you have a mushroom and you want to do a spore print, it's either fresh or you have to put a drop of water on it, when it's starting to dry out to release the spores because they hold on to their spores,
Okay.
unless
Because the
it's like a,
spores.
yeah, they're going to hold on to them, especially dried. You're not going to have spores dropping off. The only one you'd find dried with spores coming out of it would be something like those little puff balls, where you can touch it and the spores
Right.
will come out like smoke, right? It looks like that.
Yeah.
You shouldn't inhale that either. But I don't think
Okay.
that happened. Sorry. You might think it did, but I don't think
No, I'm sorry.
scientifically it's possible.
100% remember where we were.
Oh wait, I don't know. I can talk about mushrooms forever. In fact, the
Oh,
one
it looks like
section I
Colin
had on the
good.
psychedelic mushrooms is so big that somebody said I should just do a whole talk on that, you know,
Yes, you should.
because there's
Do you paint them
do I what?
ever?
Do I paint
Paint
them?
them?
Yes,
I
I
mean, do
have.
you do paintings of?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. I've painted them and I've sold little paintings and bartered them for dental work and yeah, I do. I like to.
Wow.
I used to take a lot of photos, but I hardly do anymore. I don't know, probably unless it's something really unusual or a real beauty specimen. but I have thousands of pictures of mushrooms, and they're all beautiful, they're all varied, and to me, they're all wondrous. It doesn't matter if they're so-called medicinal or so-called, like psychedelic or whatever. I love all mushrooms. I just think they're gorgeous. As a
Why do you think when the atom bomb explodes, it makes a mushroom-shaped cloud?
I don't know.
Just
I think it's
question.
just
Yeah.
I think it's just serendipity and
Well,
accident.
I know that somebody wrote their thesis. I don't know who they are, but in university, the professor told us that one of the had written his thesis on Jesus, it being a mushroom cult.
Right. Well, I think there was some book written about that. It was called I read it in the early 70s.
Okay.
It was called I forget, my first husband read it and gave it to me. I scanned it. I didn't really read it, but it was called the something in this. It was supposedly with that idea. But I'm more for the stoned ape theory. Do you know that?
The stoned ape theory.
That's
Not. I've heard that
McKenna
people
put
say
it
that.
forth. He put it forth that the cave
Oh, was
people,
it?
they did accidentally, they ate psychedelic mushrooms. I don't know which ones, maybe psilocybin, maybe amanitas, and they it did something to their brains where they made a leap, where they started
Yes.
using tools, where they started doing that. That hasn't been proven. That's just a theory. But I kind of think,
Oh,
yeah, why not? It could have worked. Why not? And I guess, their brains made a huge leap from being like a Neanderthal or something to, but Otzi the Iceman, he was discovered in the Alps,
oh,
and he had two mushrooms on him.
yes.
He had a
And were they
Pictoporus
psilocybin
betulina.
mushrooms? I mean,
No, they
no?
weren't. No, I'll tell you what they were. One was a very
Okay.
common mushroom, and it grows on a birch tree. And this mushroom was used for his wounds, and it's styptic, so it stops bleeding. It's called Pictoporus betulina, and it's very common. It grows on birch trees everywhere. And then he had another mushroom with him, Tinder polypore, or Fomes fomentarius. This one was the one in Quest for Fire. Do you remember that movie, Colin? Did you ever see it?
Oh, wow,
Quest
that
for Fire,
movie.
did you? So they didn't speak, but they had to keep a coal burning. So the only way they could do that was with the Tinder polypore.
Oh,
So Otzi the Iceman had these two mushrooms tied on like a cord, tied around his waist. And they were essential. I mean, without fire, that changed everything once they had fire. So to keep that coal burning was everything to them, keep away animals, cook their raw meat, all this stuff, right? Keep warm at night,
stay
blah,
warm,
blah. Yeah. So those two
keep
mushrooms,
predators away.
one medicinal and one functional, were found on the Iceman, let's see. But you know what I
Yeah.
find interesting, that I remember there's a bit here about Huxley. He did, Brave
Oh,
New World. He talked about soma, a gram a day keeps the whatever,
oh,
a gram is better than a dam, and people take their soma holiday. But these guys all knew each other, like Huxley and Hoffman, and so Hoffman, when he
of
was
course they did.
when he was it Huxley? No one, it was Huxley. When he was dying of laryngeal cancer, he asked his wife to inject him with 250 milligrams of LSD, which is a very high dose. So she
Yeah.
injected him. There's a doctor there. And then he wrote in a scrawled note, "More, please." So he had a very
No.
peaceful death. Yeah, his wife said it was beautiful. There was no
Really?
struggle. Yeah. So,
Did he not also write a book entitled Doors of
yes, he
Perception?
did. Yeah,
Okay,
that was in
along that.
1956. He wrote that. Yeah. And we all read that before we did acid. I
Okay.
remember that was one of the books you had to read, And yeah, so he was an advocate for psychedelics his whole life. And he
Did
used it his whole life. you know.
Did you read yeah, like we have the almost a similar reading list, R.D. Lang, a Scottish
Oh,
psychiatrist,
oh, oh.
psychologist, and
Oh, I know him, of course. Yeah, I know of him. Yeah.
And you know him personally?
oh yeah. But I believe he was one of those early experimenters with psychotropic drugs as well, or at least spoke of them, as well as the schizophrenetic or whatever mother, like some like, hey, if you're crazy, it's because your mother made you crazy. Anyway, he had some
I thought they all said that.
Do you
I
know the
thought that
term
was sort of
psychedelic? The term psychedelic was coined by, it means Greek for mind manifesting, coined by Dr.
manifesting.
Osmond. He was a psychiatrist from Britain working in Canada.
I know that name.
So he did a lot of experimenting in the 50s in Saskatchewan at a hospital, all with LSD. So he was a
I
huge
feel like
advocate.
Canada gets implicated in some very dark things sometimes.
Well, I don't know. There were stories, I mean, they had most of the people they were doing that they were injecting with all this, they were all from the prisons and stuff like that.
Yeah,
they
but
were
I don't. I
there,
mean,
there was some
that's cruel.
experimentation done in Montreal as well, and I
Oh
don't
yeah, that's right. That was
was it
very
Yes.
I don't know if it was it Wilder Penfield may have been involved in that. I'm not sure.
I
But
don't think he was, but I
no?
remember that there was some doctor there and he was kind of doing all kinds of weird shit with
Oh,
people,
Jesus, yes.
injecting people with schizophrenia with LSD. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a bad thing to do, like very bad. But I don't think Wilder Penfield was involved in it. He was a heart guy. He was just all
Okay. Okay.
heart. But who knows?
No, I don't think. Were
But
we
yeah,
suggesting that?
there was
Okay.
that thing, you're
Yeah.
right. It was all about those people coming later saying, this guy was treating us like guinea pigs and injecting us all this stuff. And, it was weird. It was almost like the Nazis or something, doing weird shit.
Yes.
Yeah. It's dangerous. I mean, this is why
Yes,
I
it
think
is.
Huxley and Hoffman were warning people that this is heavy duty stuff. You don't fuck around with it. And he was
Right.
he hated people like Timothy Leary. Huxley thought he was just
Yeah.
an idiot. But Leary wanted to
Was
fuck all these
Timothy
girls
Leary?
and get
Did
them
he think
high,
he
and
was a beach boy?
I don't know what he was. He was, I mean, he was a bright fellow. I mean, he and, Baba Ram Dass,
Yes.
what's his name, was his buddy, and they were
There
both,
was right.
yeah, they were both involved, and then Ram Dass, he wanted nothing to do with,
Well,
Leary, but they were both booted out of Harvard for the same thing, for getting students to use psychedelics. So they both
likely.
got the boot,
That wouldn't have played well at U of T, or
Oh no,
they wouldn't have good for that. Rochdale, maybe. Colin, I don't know.
I
yeah,
don't know
really.
either.
But I don't know. Let's see what's interesting about mushrooms. Oh, people are
What
using
else you
for brick.
got?
You can make well, Stella McCartney, she
Oh.
makes this stuff. It's like she has a company and it makes fake leather out of mushrooms, and I've seen it. It's beautiful. It's soft,
Oh.
it looks great. And Nike,
Is it? Is it
there's
made out of mushrooms?
yes.
I think I heard that.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And what else? They're making IKEA is doing packaging with mushrooms. Nike
This is great news. Like,
making
all of
shoes.
that.
Yeah, so there's a lot.
Amazon should make all of its box up stuff to go like that.
Well, why not?
Because I know that they are also, yeah, it would be better than cutting down all the trees to put things in a box.
Yeah, definitely. Merlin Sheldrake's book is really good. He's a British mycologist, young guy, and he loves mushrooms, and he really believes that they're changing our culture. They have. I mean, if we think about it, we have like beer, wine, everything, fermentation, all this stuff with mushrooms. But he really believes that mushrooms can teach us and teach us if we listen to them. I think they have a lot to offer. But I think it sounds
Oh, I
crazy
think
when people say they listen to them or they want to hear them or they want to, commune with them. But it's a kinship in a sense, I think, more than, people that are passionate about them want to protect them. Like the fungi organization, they're based out of Chile. My friend, he's working as their fundraiser now, but they're all to protecting, because of the rainforest coming down, all the stuff, just encroachment of civilization. We have to really guard, what we have, because so many mushrooms,
yes.
they can't be grown in a lab. So many have to be, you have to just, I think now they're growing morels, the Chinese are growing them, but so many mushrooms you can't cultivate, you can't cultivate. And some of them are spooky, like cordyceps. There's a series on TV I watched. I forget what it was called. It was just recent. It was about the mushrooms, the cordyceps invading people, going into them and taking over. And they do that with insects.
Come on.
They make them, climb
Yes.
up high things, and then I find these
Yes.
insects and they have like mushrooms have gone in them and then spread out their head or their ass. I was at a friend's
Yikes.
party and they had the cicadas. They can go into hibernation for 17 years. I forget what it's called, but it's like a thing where they go down under the ground and all of a sudden they all come out. So there'll be millions and
Wow.
millions of cicadas, and they'll be just screaming so loud because they all want to have
26
sex.
years, 72 years. Yeah.
Yeah, they want to have
go under.
sex. They want to mate. That's their main goal. So they want to
Yeah.
mate, but many of them become infected with this mushroom, with a fungus that goes into their ass,
Why?
goes into their body. It's
Oh.
a cordyceps, and their asses fall off, and then the spores. You were talking about spores. They become salt shakers of death. They're called flying salt shakers of death because everywhere they go out of their ass, these spores are going and infecting the other cicadas, male cicadas. So,
That's very good. It's a good
they want to
band-aid
mate
fly.
before they die, and they're, so that's another
Me
way.
too.
The mushrooms, they make people do crazy things, like they make ants crawl up to the highest point on a window, and then you see them later and they've got like bing mushrooms growing out of their ass and their head and everywhere
Really?
else. Yeah, and the people who live in the Tibetan
Okay.
plateau, the Mongolians there, they get cordyceps. They're the most expensive mushroom in the whole world besides truffles, and the whole family will take off for a week and they go to the high plateau. Kids get out of school and they're all picking these mushrooms, and the mushrooms are like they look like Cheetos. They've infected a larvae and they're growing out of them. So these can be cultivated. These can be grown in a place. Paul Stamets is doing it, some other people, but the ones that are wild are worth a fortune. And the Chinese everybody thinks that it makes their dick big longer, they can, go more or whatever, but yeah, but
Sure.
they're called cordyceps.
Is it a little bit similar somehow to like what the Haitians make a zombie?
Yeah, they're zombie. Yeah, they turn into zombie ants, they call them, or caterpillar zombie. But there's kinds in Canada, but they're not the kinds that are worth a lot of money. You can find them, and I find them. They're pretty cool.
And well, what do you do with them?
Nothing. I just look at them, and I show someone else. I just thought of something. There's a fungus that's usually commonly found in tropical and subtropical areas, but they found it in Vancouver as of like 2000, and it's airborne and waterborne, and it gets into the lungs, and they actually found dolphins with it. It's called Cryptococcus gattii. Yeah, so it's spread up from the States, from the Pacific Northwest, and that's they're finding that some people are infected, particularly old people who have immune compromised systems, or they have, breathing problems. So that's another bad thing about mushrooms. On the other hand, they boost our immune system, reduce inflammation, all these great things if we eat the right ones, right? But yeah. There's a Dutch company too that's making inexpensive caskets called living cocoons. And they're instead of a wood casket, they're made out of mycelium. And they're quite nice looking. And they line them with moss. And there's 4 places in Ontario you can be buried without a casket. They're called green burial grounds. Yeah. So I don't know what it costs, but let me see what else is here. Oh, this one Canadian woman, very smart. She's a graduate from MIT, young woman. She decided that the pond tailings with all the shit from the mines around her place in Alberta was bothering her. So she made something called mycomat. And it's like a giant roll, like burlap, that's embedded with oyster mushrooms. And these oyster mushrooms take all the poisons and like just get it all out of the water. And it cleans everything, and you can use this. They're using it on farms, when the runoff from the cows and all that stuff and fertilizers, to stop that. So that's one really great use of it's microremediation. A really neat thing was too, they found out when they looked at Chernobyl 5 years later, they saw this black mold growing on the walls, and they were like, "What's this?" And they looked it up, and they found out that this mushroom, I got to think of the name of it, I can't think right now, but this mushroom was actually eating the radioactive material and like cleaning it.
No.
Like getting rid of it. Yeah.
Should they bring it right away to Japan?
Yeah, right. Well, they are starting to use microremediation that way around places where there's contamination, radioactive contamination. But Chernobyl is it was really amazing when they found that. They were like, "What?"
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And Paul Stamets has done stuff with oyster mushrooms where he's put them on like a massive tar and crap and all kinds of runoff stuff and embedded it in there, put the mycelium in, suddenly it's growing. And then suddenly there's plants, trees, plants, butterflies, flowers, bees, a whole ecosystem. It can clean up all the shit, That's one of the beauties of mushrooms, And they're using it. I think they were using it in Chicago or somewhere, these mycomats to clean up the water around there. And they're finding new ways to utilize them.
Micromat.
Micromat. Yeah, she's a bright young thing. She just thought, what can I do? What can I create?
Canadian.
Yeah, she's Canadian.
Wow.
And what else? Yeah, no, yeah, micromat to eliminate a bitumen mine waste in tailing ponds and prevent contaminated water from going off, and killing all the wildlife and all this stuff. And yeah. No, what's interesting? This fungi that was found in Chernobyl, it says it was melanin rich. It's black, and it had such a strong resistance to the radiation, and it's called radiotrophic fungi. And they use the radiation as an energy source for growth. They use the radiation. So radiotrophic, that's pretty interesting. And now they're thinking that this could help shield patients undergoing radiation. And they're thinking of using it on space, the rockets and stuff on the outside to reduce the radiation, so they're
Can I interject? I know I do too often.
Yeah.
UFOs have on occasion hurt people with radiation. Could mushroom help that?
Hurt people with radiation? What do you mean?
Yeah, from their craft.
Yeah, well, I don't know. They'd have to have
Yeah.
special suits made out of it, wouldn't they? You know?
No, I mean,
You mean people being protected from radiation from
yeah, people have been
spacecraft?
actually hurt physically because of radiation.
Well, I don't know. They aren't making spacesuits out of this stuff yet. They
I see.
considered
Okay, right, right.
they considered it for the exterior of the, whatever, the spacecraft.
Okay.
But I don't know. I don't know what they're doing with that, how long, but but I have something interesting. Bryce Kendrick, in his book called The Fifth Kingdom, was writing
Yeah.
about mushrooms, and he was painting a scene. So I added to the scene because I thought it was kind of interesting. I liked his point of view on it. So maybe I could read this. It's about a paragraph. Can I read it?
Do it.
Okay.
Yes, please.
So at the end, I'm saying, imagine yourself on a picnic, right? A grassy spot dotted with flowers, maybe even some edible mushrooms. I've added more to this scenario. Under a giant white pine tree. None of this would be there if not for the fungal mycelium network underground connecting and nurturing it. The champagne, wine, or beer, the crusty baguette would not be there to enjoy without yeast. The truffle-infused pate or soft brie, blue, or Roquefort cheese wouldn't be there either. This next bit's mine. I inserted some additional stuff. You're so happy. Everything is perfect until your partner takes off their sneakers and socks and you notice the athlete's foot between the toes. I'm wondering if you might get it along with your case of candida that's being treated with antibiotics. Another glass of champagne and you try to forget about it all till your loved one scratches his foot again. After your last glass of bubbly, you're having such a good time, you've forgotten about it. You don't notice the blight spots and mildew on some flowers and plants nearby, nor the blister rust on the pine, but wondering why you're sneezing. The peaches you brought along have developed brown spots, and if left too long, fuzzy mold will appear. Back home in the fridge is a forgotten container of leftovers with your own penicillin farm. The tomatoes and peonies in your garden have spots and powdery mildew on recently healthy leaves, and your deck is rotting. Ah, fungus, friend or foe. Kendrick writes, I hope that some of you will come to think of biodiversity you encounter as a measure of your quality of life. There is so much diversity in fungi, so little we know. And I add the tip of the iceberg, I'd say. So, yeah. So it's all around us, so we should become friends with it,
It's almost between life and death. It takes us from one to other. Or does it birth us?
Sure. Well, I don't know, but
I don't know either.
There's theories too about how the first spores landed here too. Did they come from outer space?
Eli,
Yes.
ask that question where Kathy says, that's the best question. That's a wonderful question. I'm glad nobody's ever asked me that before.
No pressure.
But
Hang on now.
bring out the big one, okay?
Well, I had some goof thing about the atom bomb.
No, don't bring out the goof thing bring out like the real. No, go ahead. Bring out.
No, I already did that while you were outside. Shoot. Okay. This is it. Mushrooms speak to you, and they seem to tell you an individual. They speak to you, and it changes you. What is a mushroom?
What do you mean? What is it?
What is it? Like, why does psilocybin talk to us in our head? In 2 minutes or less, Kathy, if you could, and then we'll come back to it for our next podcast.
I don't think anyone really knows. I don't think anyone really knows that, I don't know, like, who knows? People have theories about it, I mean, any mushrooms, I don't know. People want answers, like, why am I here? What's my purpose? What's it all about, Alfie? That kind of, like they have questions. And I think sometimes people who are asking those questions want to go deeper, into some altered state where they think they might find some answers. I think it's just human nature. People have been wanting to, people have been ingesting hallucinogens for thousands of years,
Yeah.
for thousands of years.
And so have animals. And it's not just some animals, but animals do engage and
Well,
get
the
drunk.
reindeers up in Lapland, the people,
Yes.
the shamans drink the piss of the reindeers that have eaten the Amanita,
Yes.
the Amanita muscaria, because it makes them sick if they eat it themselves. So they drink the piss of the reindeer. And there was a theory about the Santa Claus theory, and the Laplanders wear these red and white outfits, right? And they collect these mushrooms, and that the reindeer, the jumping reindeer, they're high. These mushrooms, the animals, the reindeer are high, so they leap around. It looks like they're flying. So they had this. He thinks that that's where the whole notion of this guy in the red suit who flies with his, because he's eating them to the shaman. So they're all high, on the red and white Amanita muscaria.
Yeah.
So who knows,
I think it's real.
I don't know, but I know they're eating them, and
I think this would be like the perfect.
I would drink the piss.
We should save this for our Christmas show.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a very charming idea, but that's too far away.
Like, here comes Santa Claus. Here comes Santa Claus.
Yeah.
And so, Space Cab listeners, that was plenty to think about. I don't know where we got to. I suspect we're going to have to revisit this. My mind has melted. So on that note, see you next Monday.